Hey coders, this is Ben, founder and CEO of Holoscribe, and welcome to Lesson 1 on Learning to Code. This week on Codecademy, you're going to be learning about HTML. HTML is a coding language that is used to create web pages. One way to understand how HTML is used is to think of it as the building blocks for any web page. I want to show you an example. Here on my screen, you can see a very basic HTML file. Now, there's some bits and pieces in this code that may not make sense, but don't worry, through your Codecademy courses, you're going to learn how to create a HTML file like this and what are the different elements that need to go into a basic HTML file. But for right now, the main thing to know is that at the top of a HTML is a few lines of code that tell this file, hey, you're a HTML file. HTML files are then broken into different parts. Some of them have a head, some of them have a footer, but all of them will have a body, as you can see right here. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to learn about all this in your first week. But for now, all we need to understand that within the body of this HTML that we're seeing right now is some text that has been defined as a heading. That's what the H1 means. And some more text that's defined as a paragraph. That's what the P stands for. The cool thing is that even with this very, very basic 10 lines of code in a HTML file, we already have the building block for an actual web page. And I want to show you that now. Because if I come across to where I've saved my file and I right click on it and I say open with my browser, which for me is Google Chrome, but you might use Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, or Microsoft Edge, it doesn't matter. But if I open up the HTML file in my browser, this is what I see. You see that? There's my heading and there's my paragraph. And already, with just a couple of lines of code in HTML, I have some elements on a web page that the browser is able to read and display. One thing you'll notice is that it looks pretty boring, but don't worry about that because later in the coming weeks, when we start to look at CSS coding language, we'll find ways that we can change things like the fonts, the position of where this text is, the background that's behind it, and other elements like that. Throughout this week in Codecademy, you're going to be shown how to set up your own HTML file, how to add in elements just like we've seen here, like headings and paragraphs. But for now, I hope you get a really simple glimpse of how a HTML file with different elements defined in the body can start to create a web page. Now, normally in these weekly lesson videos, we'd spend a bit of time talking more about some of the principles you're going to learn. But since it's the first week, I think the best thing we can do is jump right over to Codecademy and to let me show you how the courses on Codecademy are going to work for you. So what you need to do now is click on the link that your teacher will provide for your very first lesson. If you haven't yet created a Codecademy account, you need to ask your adult helper to go and set up an account. Instructions of how to do this are in the introduction video that has already been provided by your teacher. So once you've signed up and once you've logged in and you clicked on the link to the first lesson provided by your teacher, you should be taken to the Introduction to HTML course page, like this. To get going, click Start. Once the page loads, what you're going to see is your Codecademy course lesson. Now, this page is broken up into three main areas. On the left, you have your instructions. Normally, there'll be some introduction material for you to read, and it'll show you some examples of what you're about to do. In the middle, we have our coding area, where you will be typing your code following the instructions that you'll be given on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side is your web browser. This is where you'll see the results of the code you create. For each task, read through the learning material and examples at the top of the left column and continue down till you see your instruction. Sometimes there'll just be one, like is the case here, but more often than not, there'll be 3 or 4 things for you to do on this page. You'll notice that sometimes under instruction is a stuck get a hint button. If on a task in the instructions, you're stuck on what to do, you can click on this button when available to get a bit more information around how to answer the task correctly. You'll also notice that there's a handy HTML cheat sheet that you can link off to from this left-hand column as well. Some other parts about this page that are worth noting is down the very bottom left, you can see the lesson outline that has steps to the different tasks that make up this lesson. This will come in handy if you need to refer back to some previous steps or if you just want to see how far through the lesson you are. So let's do the first task together. It says, in the code editor to the right, type your name in between the opening H1 tag and the closing H1 tag, and then press run. So I'm going to do that now. Before I click run, I just want to show you some other buttons available in your code editor. We have a reset button. This will reset the code for the beginning of this task. So if you feel you've made a mistake and it's easier just to start this task again, you can click this button to go back to the beginning of this task. So here I go. I'm typing in my H1. I'm clicking run. And you can see on the right-hand side in my browser, my H1 heading, Ben. I now click next to continue as I've done all the tasks in the instructions. Step 2 in this lesson has some more learning material for us to read, so make sure you read that thoroughly, and then we can click next. And now in step 3, after you read the learning material for this step, we can see that we've been given an instruction to add a body to your web page using the body element. So I'm going to do that now. I've added the body element. I'm going to click run and see what happens. Oops, I mustn't have read the instructions properly. You'll often notice that when you click run, if you get something wrong, there'll be little prompts down the bottom of the code editor that suggest what you might need to look for or how to correct your issue. I added the opening tag for the body element, but I forgot to add the closing tag. So I'm going to correct that now and click run. Great, I've completed that task. Now I'm being asked to add the following code between the opening and closing body tags. I'm going to create a new line for this because it's always good to do a new element on a new line. I create the opening of my paragraph tag. I type in the text. Another nifty hit is you can often copy and paste the text from the left column into your code, especially when there's a lot of text to type in. I'm going to make sure I close my tag this time and hit run. Excellent. I've completed the 2 tasks and instructions. I can see on the browser that I've got my paragraph text showing in my body, and I can click next to go to the next activity. One thing to remember is that you don't need to save your work as you go. Each time you click run, or each time you click to go to the next tasks, Codecademy will save your progress automatically. You can now follow this on your Codecademy account and go through the first set of exercises. For this week, we're going to be covering 2 HTML lessons. The one we just started was the elements lesson that had 16 steps for you to get through. After you complete that, you can move on to the structure lesson. Once you've finished that, by all means, you can continue on to tables, forms, learn semantic HTML, and even more. But if you're following this course with us, elements and structure are the only 2 lessons you need to do for this week. But what I will point out before we finish is some helpful tips that I've found as I've been doing Codecademy. First of all, always read the instructions properly. I often find I'm so keen to just get into the actual instructions and tasks that I don't really read the learning material at the top of each topic. I definitely recommend having a proper read of that because it not only explains what you're about to do and why, but it also gives you some really handy examples that when you're doing your task or if you get stuck, you can refer back to. The other tip I can give you is some things to try if you're clicking run, but you continue to get errors. The first is read the instructions again. Often I find that the mistakes I've made are simply because I've put the code in the wrong spot or I haven't understood exactly what was asked. So the first thing I try to do if I click run and get an error is reread the tasks instructions and make sure I'm following them properly. If after doing that I still have an issue, one common mistake that most people make is that they do everything right except for properly opening and closing your tags. So in the example here on the screen, we've got an opening P tag and a closing P tag. Sometimes when I make a mistake, I put the opening of the P tag, type the text that I'm doing, click run, and forget that I haven't closed the paragraph tag. So always check that out if you're getting stuck. The other handy hint, as we saw before, is that some instructions also provide a stuck get hint button. I always try to do the task myself before clicking that, but if I really get stuck, it's a great way to see what the potential answer can look like. Another great resource that's always available to link to from the bottom of the left-hand column in Codecademy is the cheat sheet. The cheat sheet has some really great examples of the types of elements and structures that you're going to constantly use as we learn HTML. It's got examples of how to do list items, add videos, add divs, how to structure your HTML, about closing tags, all the things that as you go through this course, it will be handy to sometimes refer back to if you get stuck. Failing all that, if you're still having issues or you're really struggling to understand, please do contact your teacher with the questions that you have. Give details about what task you're up to and the specific instructions or tasks that you're struggling with. Your teacher will try to help. We'll ask one of our team for advice. We'll try to get back to you during the week so you can keep going, but at the very least, any questions or any problems that you have, we'll try to answer in the next lessons video. The very last thing I want to mention is that sometimes Codecademy is going to prompt you to upgrade your account to the Pro edition. It might do this between lessons. It might even do this throughout a lesson. I want to be very clear that all the lessons that you need to do as part of the course we are running, you can do on the free account. So if you ever get a prompt like you're seeing on the screen now, you can simply click start the next lesson or skip. That's all from me for this week's video. I hope you enjoy your first week of Codecademy as you learn about HTML structure and elements, and I look forward to seeing the web pages you build at the end of your first week. Speak to you next time.